Hello everyone, my name is Beatrice. I am the co-founder and CEO of Smart Tribe, and today I am here with Chris Humphrey, who is the founder of Jobs on Toast. Hi Chris.
Hi Beatrice, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely pleasure. Secretly, we are calling you the godfather of Smart Tribe, to be honest.
Wow, I'm flattered, thank you.
You are one of the top people I know who have been super helpful to us and to many other PhDs around the world, helping them with the transition from from academia to industry. You are a great mentor. You're also a very nice person. I always like chatting to you. But to give a little bit more background, because it's a tricky one, running Jobs on Toast, which is a website helping PhDs with the transition, it's a great source of ideas, resources, interviews. I personally find it, and keep still rediscovering, find very, very useful. This is your hobby or your second job, because actually from 8 to 5 you're working as a banker, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I've got a day job. I work as a project manager and a team leader for a bank. So yeah, that's my full-time job. But I also do Jobs on Toast. I guess you could say maybe it started off as a bit of a hobby, but it's grown into a sort of side project or side hustle. That yeah, it does take up some of my time, but I do really enjoy it. And to me, it's the whole thing of kind of giving back to the PhD and the postdoc community, of which I was a part myself once. But it's giving something back to those guys.
Exactly, because what gets you started to do? You started 8 years ago, Jobs on Toast. What makes you to do it? Is because it's such a big problem, you want to help others, or because you found it challenging to transition yourself? You have PhD in history, right? And then you become a banker.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it goes back even sort of more than a decade, really, that I got invited to go and give a talk at my old university by my PhD supervisor. And he asked me to come and give a talk there. Could you just come and give a talk, Chris, about how to market yourself for a career outside academia? Because he knew I'd successfully made that transition myself. And so I went up to York and gave that talk to a room probably of about 15 people or so. And I was just amazed and blown away by the effect of spending about 40 minutes just talking to people about this subject. And it just made such a difference to those people. It just gave them hope, and it gave them an idea of how they could move on from after their PhD to go on to a job outside of academia if they wanted. I mean, the main thing is to have a choice. If people want to pursue an academic career, that's fine, and that's up to them. But not everybody can, and there are more candidates than jobs. So it's good to have a plan B or even a plan A. So after I did that talk, I really thought, well, how can I get this information to a wider audience? And so that's when I kind of thought, right, I just need to, if I can get a website going, then this is how I can publish this information. And it took me about three years to figure out how to set up a WordPress blog and get some material written and get some stuff published. But I was really pleased once it got going. It's just grown and grown in the numbers of visitors, and I have around about 40,000 unique visitors a year now.
Oh wow, that's amazing. And this is just the UK, or it's a global audience?
It is global. Yeah, I think there's quite a lot of UK audience, but also in North America as well, and in particularly the US, because I think it's part of this sort of message for me is really about people who maybe finished their PhD but are on temporary contracts or doing adjuncting. Just pay per course. Maybe they're with an ambition to get into academia, but actually, potentially the longer you stay doing that, the less your chances. So it's really to sort of target those people and show them that there is another way. They don't have to feel trapped or stuck in that, especially as it sort of pays less and less money and is less secure. You know, there are very well paid jobs in industry for people who have PhDs, smart people, and so that's what I'm trying to help them to make that transition to.
Mm. Obviously, it's a big problem. I'll notice there's so many people helping PhDs transition from academia to industry. So it became industry on its own, almost. So it's a big, very, very big problem. Why do you think it's such a big problem? What are the biggest obstacles for PhD to make those transitions?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think quite rightly, when you're a PhD, you're very focused on your research topic. You know, you're kind of trying to know more and more about a smaller and smaller area to kind of get a research breakthrough or answer a research question. So you're very focused, and I think one of the challenges is, especially given the number of PhDs versus the number of academic jobs, you know, there are less than 50% of PhDs now go into academia. So it's really to help. How do you help all those other people? And some universities are actually really good at providing careers support, careers training, transition training, this type of stuff, so that you know, to help their PhDs, but not all universities are. And so I think where there's this gap, you know, people are looking for information on the internet, or universities are looking to hire people to come in and give these kind of talks. And I think that's where sites like mine and services like yours come in, that we can really sort of connect these people up with people in industry, you know, to help them to successfully make that transition.
What is why companies should even hire PhDs? What's so special about that group? So what's so different to masters and so on? Why it's so special? Why companies? How would you pitch them to companies?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I mean, PhDs have got a certain skill set that is, you know, is very appropriate for academia, that kind of research mindset. And then some people might think, well, how does that really play out in companies? And it's true, they're not necessarily, I mean, it may be so in a pharmaceutical company or something like that. They are looking to hire researchers to kind of have breakthroughs in drugs or chemicals or something like that. But, you know, a lot of companies aren't necessarily so research driven, but they're just looking for good people to fill the roles they've got. And I think that's the key thing I think about PhDs is actually you have got a much broader skill set beyond the research skill set. There's other things that you can do, like project management, like communication. Often PhDs are very good with technology, with IT, programming languages, that type of thing. And so that's where I think PhDs actually do make very good employees, because they've got some of these hard and softer skills that are actually quite in demand in a sort of modern workplace, you know, in something like banking. You know, in the bank I work, where I work, we've got three PhDs out of about 180 people. So, you know, they do fit in amongst everybody else.
This is what you are touching on, are the transferable skills, which companies really appreciate from academics, is the curiosity, diverse ways of thinking, the research skills, working independently, and so on. Which transferable skills you would find the companies find the most useful from PhDs?
Yeah, I think from my point of view, it's well, we would call it within industry or business, we'd call it project management. It's not something that you always immediately think of when you're a researcher, but actually you are a project manager in the way that you came up with an idea, and then you got money to fund that idea, and then you took it through all the stages of the research and to a conclusion, maybe something else like a patent or whatever. So you manage something all the way through the life cycle. And that's something key that we're always looking for in business. Either it could be like, oh, we need somebody to you know, have a cost saving program to reduce our costs. So again, that's taking some ideas and seeing them through. Or it could be like launching a new product. You know, what kind of products and services do our customers want? Again, doing that sort of research and thinking, and then managing it through to the actual launch of the product. So I think project management and that managing the sort of development life cycle is a really key matchup between the skills that researchers have and the needs of modern business and industry, where we're always looking for the next big thing to differentiate you in the market against your competitors.
That's very good. very, very good, important skill. For those who are decided to transition, you have designed 5 steps how to go around it. So PhD student or somebody who just defends a PhD say, okay, I need to find a job. Okay, there is no place for me in the university, or I'll just want to move out of there. I really like what you have designed. It's available on your website. If you can just a little bit tell us about it, because it's quite prepares very well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, this is something, like I say, when I go back to that original talk I gave in 2009, I really reflected on what was a process I went through when I left academia. And so then I came up with this sort of, 5 steps that I went through. So the first one is to really identify your transferable skills and get beyond thinking of yourself as a researcher, but think, what other skills have I got in my toolbox that are valuable, to business or industry, or government or the charity sector, whatever sector you want to go into. What skills have I got that I can that are valuable to them? And then the second part, really, from when you've done that, is to really focus on, I call it like choosing your profession, because it can be seem overwhelming. There's so many jobs, there's so many possibilities beyond academia. What could I even do? And I think if you're too broad in your search, you'll never quite match with anybody. And so really it's a case of focusing on something. So focus on health, focus on financial services, focus on IT, and focus on one specific industry where you can get to know that industry a little bit more, get to learn the sort of language of that industry, the trends, get to meet some people in that industry. And so you can really begin to give a bit of a focus to your job search. And the other thing that sort of goes along with that is getting experience. Often as PhDs, we can be so focused on our research and getting teaching experience that we don't necessarily get relevant work experience. But I always encourage people to try and get some work experience. It could be as an intern, for instance, or maybe just get a part-time job, working part-time for a publisher, something like that. And then if you come to get a job post-PhD, if you go to work in publishing or the media, then at least you can point to some relevant experience beyond just your academic experience. That's the third step. And then the fourth step is really around personal branding, and it's being able to sort of sell yourself. And it's coming up with a kind of job title that is really something that somebody in industry will recognize. And if you just call yourself a PhD or a postdoc or something, somebody in business or industry might not really recognize what that is. And doesn't really describe you very well. Whereas if you can brand yourself as I'm a research project manager, or I'm a science communication specialist, if you can come up with one of those titles that are more recognizable within business or industry, then that's really going to help you when it comes to interviews and that type of thing. Which is really where it comes back to the sort of the last step, the step 5, which is telling a great story. And I think sometimes PhDs can kind of feel, I've failed. I didn't manage to get an academic job, and now I'm doing something second best. And some of that sort of aura or feeling can kind of radiate off them. But that's not what an interviewer wants to hear. They don't want to see somebody who's sort of down and sort of sad about themselves. They want to see somebody who's buoyant and upbeat. So the fifth part is really telling a great story. And I always say that you should talk about your PhD as like a challenge. You overcame this challenge of a big research project that you took on. You got the funding for it and you delivered it. And now you're looking for the next challenge. You've moved on from that, and now you're looking for another challenge to take your skills and experience into the world outside of academia, and do something more practical or do something more values oriented. And so it sounds more upbeat and something that can connect with an interviewer.
Yeah, especially the fourth point you mentioned, the fourth step. I call it make yourself relevant. Very often when people come on our platforms, they say, well, I'm PhD in neurology or biochemistry or something, and they just give topics of the research papers. I said, how does this going to be relevant to the companies you are pitching? So yes, you pointed to very nicely in our previous conversation we had about broadening their mind and thinking a little bit outside of academia. Yeah,
that's it. Because another thing I always say is that the world the world of work or outside of academia is not organized into academic departments, because when you spend a lot of time in school or university, you're used to everything being physics or chemistry or history or whatever. But the world outside of academia is not organized like that. It's organized into marketing or computer programming or something. So it's thinking, how does your skills apply to a department or a team within a company or a government department, something like that, rather than sort of getting beyond your research discipline.
Yeah, and when is the right time to start looking for a job? Because very often we have people who already done the PhD, they've been a little bit trying to stay in academia or not, and only then they start looking for a job. I always think it should be a little bit earlier, when they are still students. So this is one question: when, and also how. You know, if they only have their network and they know only people at academia, how they supposed to, you know, sending endless CVs through LinkedIn? What is your advice?
I definitely think you need to be starting at least sort of 18 months to a year before you finish your dissertation, which sounds challenging, because it's like, oh, shouldn't I be focused on my research and everything like that? Yes, you should. But if you don't start early enough, you're not going to be able to do some of the steps that I've talked about. So I think you've got to start early. And yeah, it is possible to, you know, look at things like, you know, I mean, ultimately you will be going to apply for jobs that are advertised, but some of these activities that I've been talking about, like work experience, you know, you need to have a bit of a run up to be able to get that work experience placement. And other things like building up a network of people who you might know, some people in industry or business. You know, again, that takes time. So these are some of the places to start around networking, around getting industry knowledge, around getting the right experience, and around you know, identifying your transferable skills. And they're all things that you could do in 1 or 2 hours a week. You know, you can still be carrying on with your research, but just give yourself a break. I mean, I used to just do something like, you know, half an hour first thing when I get to my desk, you know, just spend half an hour or so just doing something, you know, improving my CV or reaching out to somebody or reading something, so that it was done. And if you do a little bit each day, it stops it all being saved up, you know, until the end of making a panic.
I know that many PhDs do not like going to recruiters, because they very often misplace them into different jobs. They don't understand the expertise, transferable skills. They prefer to tick boxes. Which places are the best for PhDs to look for jobs?
Well, I definitely think to you know, to use the online sort of tools that you can get to search for jobs. But I think you've got to kind of use them smartly. I think one of the things that people do is they may be like, okay, so type in jobs for PhD in history or something like that. But an employer is not going to be advertising for a PhD in history on their job advert, you know, unless it's kind of like, I don't know, to be a researcher for a TV company that's making history programs or something like that, you know. So it's using job adverts, I think, is the way to start, but also looking for keywords that match back to your transferable skills. So one of the things that I did when I looked for my first job outside of academia is I was interested in e-learning and web-based training. And so I looked for keywords like e-learning consultant, e-learning company, e-learning jobs, and those types of things. And then by having identified some keywords that matched with what I thought I could do, that really helped me to narrow down a subset of jobs and a subset of companies that I could then target to get a job. So I think you can use the tools that are available, but you've got to use them in a smarter way than just trying to match you know, PhD with the job description.
What are the common mistakes PhDs are doing while searching for a job?
Yeah, common mistakes. I mean, I do work with some private clients, and I do see people, and it's unsurprising, and it's no blame to them, but people are still very academic in their language that they use, and I think it's trying to take a little bit of time to understand the differences between the way that academics talk and present themselves like classic one is like talking about, this is my argument, you know, or something like that. I'm arguing this, especially in the humanities, is something that we say, you know. But if you go to an employer and you're being somebody who argues all the time, well, it's probably not the sort of person that we necessarily want to hire. So it's trying to be more self-conscious about your language, and understand how you can present yourself more in the ways that are business friendly. I mean, another example is in academia, we always talk about teaching, but in business, we always talk about training. And it's sort of same kind of thing. You know, it's about getting knowledge into other people's heads or getting them to learn themselves. But it's looking out for some of those more subtle kind of nuances. And so that is one of the biggest challenges, I think, is learning to navigate between a different world to the world that you're used to.
What we also find is majority of academics on Smart Tribe platform have scientific backgrounds. We have far less humanities. And I have to admit, it is much easier for them to find jobs nowadays. It's much more difficult for people with humanities, with languages, history, you name it. What would be your advice exactly for people with humanities when if they have to pivot, you know, they're not going to stay at academia, they're not going to do teaching, they have to find something else. I mean, my background is also humanities like yours. I find it very easier to transition to business like yourself. Is that a common thing for people with humanities?
I think so, yeah, because I guess when you're a scientist, you have a certain body of scientific knowledge, and that's something that can carry over quite well into into industry, like you said, you know, like a pharmaceutical company, something like that. I think it is harder in humanities because the subject matter knowledge that you have, like medieval history or Ernest Hemingway or whatever your speciality is something that's going to be less what area a company is working in. So I think that's where it comes back to this whole thing around transferable skills, is that you're selling yourself less on your subject matter knowledge, and you're selling yourself more on your transferable skills. And so that's really, I think, the key thing for anyone in the humanities is to focus on that transferable skill set that you've got, and market yourself under that. But it is quite interesting because, you know, it's a case that actually a lot of people who are even like medical doctors, you know, who are giving up their profession, you know, leaving the NHS or something and not being doctors anymore, you know. So there is a general trend away from necessarily, sticking to what your subject matter knowledge is and going into something different. You just have to be a bit creative with that skill set and knowledge and the sort of behaviors that you've acquired.
And over those years, you have been helping PhDs with the transitions and giving advice. Have you noticed any changes since 10 years ago when you gave your first speech? Is also any changes in terms of, I don't know, geographical specification, or maybe even very recent changes due to the COVID?
Yeah, I think there's more of an awareness now than there was perhaps when I was doing it back in the day about alternative careers, you know, outside of academia. I do think the level of awareness is higher. So that's definitely one thing that I would draw attention to. And I think really even in the last couple of months, I have seen another change, which is academic hiring has really stopped or gone into reverse. So I think there are people who are, post PhD who are aiming to become academics, or even academics themselves who are hoping to get tenure, really realizing that the job market has taken a nosedive. And so I think there's even a much more of an interest from people who are already academics to leaving academia. But I think a lot of the same advice and things apply to them that I've already talked about.
What about those who already made this transition and they find hard to settle down in totally different environment? What do you think the reasons for that, and what would be your advice for them to succeed in industry?
Yeah, I think it can be difficult for some people to make that transition, because things in industry or business there are different priorities. I mean, within academia, you can keep on going researching something forever, and finding out more and more. Whereas in business, it's quite goal oriented. There's obviously it's commercial. You've got to make a profit to stay in business. And so I think sometimes it can be difficult to adapt to that more commercial way of thinking and those more short-term deadlines and horizons. But I mean, in my own case, I really enjoyed that, and I kind of found when I started working in this e-learning company that I was working for, that actually I really enjoyed like being in a team of other people, and I realized that actually academia can be quite isolating. Mm-hmm. So it was good fun to work with other people and actually to have shorter term kind of goals to collaborate on and get something done and get the feedback. So yeah, I think there are some sort of cultural kinds of changes that that people can get used to, but it's they are, in my opinion, they're often quite positive.
Have you also noticed that in the recent years, more and more academics have become more ambitious to become entrepreneurs and starting their own companies?
Yeah, it does seem to be. I think I think there can be a little bit of a kind of stigma within academia about turning your research into money or doing consulting or something like that, because it's kind of seen as very pure just to do academic research. But I think it's just fantastic that people can take the knowledge and things that they've acquired through their academic research and then bring that to a wider audience. And if that means being an entrepreneur on the side, or maybe spinning out what you do into an actual company, I think that's fantastic, and there is a lot of support for that available. I know some universities are having more sort of like innovation hubs where you can have incubators and startups to help people to kind of make that that transition from just pure research into a more kind of commercialized idea.
Yes,
and product.
What I've noticed, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, looking through profiles on our platform, almost every introduction, a brief introduction of each person, it says, I want to make a change, I want to make an impact, I want to help. So we can see far more need for actually being attached to the world and what's happening around academics, and being involved with this, not just to do research at academia and that's it, but actually using this with changing the world for the better people lived in. I don't know if this is just a recent trend because what we've been exposed for the past months, but it's very, very common. Also the trends we see, it's more people, there's almost nobody who ticks the box they want to work for financial services, but a lot of people want to work for healthcare, sustainability issue, climate change. So those things really, really matter to people.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear about that as a trend. And I mean, in my experience, a lot of academics are very mindful of of ththings like purpose and making a difference in the world. But maybe sometimes in academia it's more pure. It's about the subject matter discipline, and focusing on that. But I think that's great if people can kind of. I mean, that's certainly how I felt, is because I had strong leanings towards sustainability and doing things that were more green and that type of thing. But I couldn't always find the way to express that within academia. But I think that's really interesting if people can, make those connections between their own values and things that they want to get done and their own skill set, and then connect that up with either problems in the world if they're entrepreneurs, or companies have problems that they need to be solved, and that's why they need to hire people to help to solve those problems as well. But no, that sounds really interesting and an encouraging trend.
That's right. There's a couple of other questions I want to ask you based on your experience. Exactly why companies hiring PhDs? Very often we come across a question, well, but we have some other recruiters for students hire, and we find that very often PhD degree is not recognized as qualification, and it's really difficult. Many people find even more difficult the transition to make, because they don't want to start with much lower positions than actually they should be. How to overcome, how to explain to company, actually I have a PhD, doesn't mean I am a grad. There is a difference. Why PhD is not widely recognized as a qualification?
Yeah, it is a really interesting question, because I think people are obviously familiar with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees. But it's interesting about a PhD, because you kind of can ask the question, well, what does it qualify you in, or what does it qualify you for? And I think it does qualify you. It is a qualification in showing that you have reached a certain level of academic research and academic rigor and academic achievement. But the question is, well, how does that really transfer over into industry or business? Because, if I'm working in business, I don't necessarily need somebody to be operating at that high research level. So I think that's what it does make it quite hard to translate. But I think something that I've sort of encouraged people to say is, like, comes back to this personal branding, that you can kind of call yourself, like, I'm a science communicator with a PhD, and have a kind of expression of, like, you have got a PhD that helps to back up your kind of profession or your role, but you don't lead with that PhD thing, or like I'm a project manager with a PhD in a specific subject. So, I'm good at managing those types of projects because I've got a PhD in it, and I can understand, and I bring that sort of subject matter knowledge. So that's how I would encourage people to pitch it, is not leading with it, but to have it, like, in the background as a sort of thing that backs up your main role or profession, or the main brand that you're trying to use.
Interesting. And what type of jobs are there for academics? Very often when we speak to people, they say, you don't have to only work at R&D. There are loads of dozens of other jobs you are qualified to do. And also level of seniority, what seniority they should be pitching for, what type of jobs they should be applying for.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because like you said, you are different to a graduate. So it's not like you're just graduated as a BA or MA, and then you're kind of going into some of the sort of graduate level jobs. You are somebody with 3 or 4 years experience, or if you're a postdoc, maybe you've got 7 or 8 years experience. So I think you should be looking higher than graduate jobs. But the flip side to that is, if you haven't got a lot of industry experience, then it's harder to compete with other candidates who have got that industry experience. So I kind of think you need to kind of go in at a level that's above graduate, but maybe a little bit lower than you actually are capable of, because you're a little bit taking a hit because of the lack of experience. And that's certainly what I did. But what I found is that PhDs can often accelerate very quickly through companies. So once they get in and they get that experience, and because they're very smart, intelligent people, good people skills, then they can progress quite quickly. So I think a key thing is not to think that your first job outside of academia is like your permanent job forever, but to see that as a kind of springboard from that job onto the next job that you're going to be able to move on from after that.
Oh, that's very encouraging. I like that. Maybe we can leave it at that, because my last question will be, what are your final advice to all those PhDs who are troubled with the transition from academia to industry? They are still thinking about it, and once they decide, they are going to do it. And especially now, when we see there's less jobs available because of the COVID. What would be your advice, the golden rule or advice?
Yeah, I think one thing I would say is that if you just sit on your computer and apply jobs, you're doing what everyone else is doing, and that's why I really encourage people to do informational interviews and networking. So once you've identified the kind of role that you like, find people on LinkedIn who are already doing that role. Someone like myself as a project manager, make contact with them, and spend something like 20 minutes with them asking them a little bit about how they got their job, what sort of typical things they do in a day, what are their industry trends. And through that type of networking activity, you can build up a good view of industry or business, the sector that you're targeting. And that's one way to differentiate yourself from other candidates, I think. It's not the case that you're asking somebody for a job, but on the other hand, those people might be useful to you 6 months down the line, where they might say, oh yeah, I met this guy, Chris, and he asked me, we had a chat, and now I sort of suddenly realized, yeah, we're looking for somebody like that. So I think things like informational interviewing and networking, to me, is a really key thing that you can do to, to really boost your prospects when it comes to looking for jobs.
Oh, I like that, especially for us, because that's what Smart Tribe is all about. It's all about networking. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And join Smart Tribe. That's the other thing I should have said. Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much. Always pleasure speaking to you. And I encourage absolutely everyone to visit your website and learn a lot from Jobs on Toast. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Okay, thanks very much, Beatrice. Thank you.